introduction. Terry Horton is Director of College Writing and the Instructional Effectiveness Specialist for the Port Huron campus, and Jasmine Dean is an Academic Advisor and the Instructional Effectiveness Specialist for the Muskegon campus. I just don't know what to say about Terry and Jasmine. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them in their roles as the Instructional Effectiveness Specialist. These two are phenomenally awesome. Their knowledge and expertise combined with their enthusiasm and their get-it-done attitudes have just been a joy to work with. And what I would like to do is introduce Terry.
Thanks. Really nice. I like being phenomenal. Everybody knows that there are kind of two pieces to this whole thing. We want it to be very conversational. The whole purpose of doing this is for you to have a kind of safety, security feeling of talking to those faculty members that might need a little bit of help with their classroom management. So we know that some of you have some education background and understand what classroom management is about. Some of you might not. So you're going to see a little bit of crossover between those two areas. And start off with something that we've probably all seen or experienced at some point. This is a quick video clip.
I know some of you are not about this, but hey, I don't good. How are you? Nice to see you. We're again about country and where we have come from and where we are going. Yeah.
Are we going to be talking about this the whole time, or how many?
But yes, this is the entire semester. Right now, we're just going to do a little bit of review. We talked last week a little bit about yes. When are you getting the grades? They're coming out 2 weeks. You can use this next test if you want to get those. I know you're concerned about that. A lot of people are, but talking about here is yes. Is the assignment due tomorrow? Yes, the assignment due tomorrow. The paper you're supposed to write. You've already got your topics, hopefully, so that'll be covered. Talking again about this is the Republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic for which it stands. Dr. Barnes, what is the Republic?
No, it's about
What is the Republic?
a form of government where public pays are.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. She said it's a form of government in which the people retain power over them. And what has that been turned around 180 degrees? What would you say? Yeah. What time is it? Man.
So some of you are laughing because kind of an extreme, but we have seen it in some of our classes in Baker. That particular instructor spent a lot of time in actions that should have been taken care of on the first day and kind of let the students control the classroom.
I just go through the objectives for today. So today we're going to talk about how to coach faculty. In particular, we're thinking about faculty that we evaluate. We want to help them establish classroom procedures. We want to talk about building respect in the classroom, how instructors manage the workload, how to make constructive group work and a positive community, and talk a little bit about succeeding with our difficult students.
We want you to remember that, you're coaching faculty, so you're making suggestions based on observations and student evaluations. And it's a sensitive thing to talk to faculty about because it's not necessarily a positive thing, but it's really essential that our instructors are able to manage that classroom effectively from day one so that there's success from the students in completing the course. Now, you might be a qualified instructor in the classroom as far as the content or the knowledge, but if they can't manage the classroom, then that and knowledge experience is just going to go out the window if they can't use the classroom effectively. So Terry and I are going to give just a general overview of what a well-managed classroom looks like and might even feel like.
Most of education, you're going to be familiar with this book, The First Days of School by Harry Wong. It's by reading for almost any education program. And those of you who aren't familiar with it, Harry Wong is a leader in education, and this book is really geared toward elementary students. He talks about setting up procedures and policies at the beginning of class, on the first day of class, letting students know what expectations are. And in the book, as a college instructor, you'll come to find that even though it's written at a lower level, it makes sense for our college students. Everything in there applies to our students. And, you know, Harry talks about how we set the tone the first day of class. And the tone that we set the first day of class carries over throughout the whole quarter. Think about yourself being a college student. Think about sitting in a college class the first day when that instructor didn't set the right tone. Maybe there was like an adversarial relationship going, or the instructor tried to intimidate you. Think about the instructor who makes that comment, such as, look to your left and look to your right. One of those students won't be here at the end of the quarter. Right? Not going to set the right tone for the classroom. But we make students feel welcome and comfortable, and when we let them know that there are procedures in place and that we do have expectations for them, what those expectations are, they're going to feel more comfortable, and it's just going to set the stage for a good quarter.
For example, when I was adjunct, I taught math courses. So let's say I taught a Tuesday, Thursday pre-algebra course. That first, on day one, I'm going to spend probably all but 30 minutes of a day class through setting the expectations of the course. Make sure that I do a thorough review of the syllabus, discussing stuff that related to Blackboard, classroom policies, you know, a comfortable learning environment, and making sure that the students feel comfortable talking to each other. And I might use the last 20 to 30 minutes to go, okay, so let's pretend that we've just started class. This is how the class is going to run. So I'm going to take advantage of that first day to really ensure that everybody knows this is how it's going to run, rather than taking most of the time to teach and a little bit of a time setting up the tone for the class. And then I found that in my experience, by taking that extra time on day one, I had little to no problems in the rest of the quarter because all my students knew this is exactly what's expected in this class, and this is how the class is going to run.
Jasmine, because I think a lot of it's about belief. When the instructors believe that it takes that much time, because it does feel like a lot of time in a 10-week course, but when you take the time to establish your expectations and your procedures, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off big time. And instructors that do that really don't struggle that much with the classroom management. An instructor has is the syllabus. Think about complaints that you get about your instructors. You know, what are the complaints about? Not being prepared or not showing up on time. These are things that the instructors should be addressing in their syllabus. These are things that really need to be in the syllabus, that they need to go over the class to set those rules in place. So the first thing they want in the syllabus is their start time. And class 9 o'clock, I have that in my syllabus. Class starts at 9 o'clock every day we have class. That means to the students, I will start at 9, and then you need to start at 9 o'clock. They need to know you're going to begin whether they are there or they aren't there. But to be consistent. Same thing with ending times. We hold time, right? We expect our instructors to, and students need to know that that's the expectation. I know on our campus, we're really strict about that. And students know we stay until 9:40. They will be more comfortable, and if they're not going to get out early, they won't be fighting so hard to try to get out. And the break is what you're going to give them 15 minutes. They get minutes. You know, don't let that stretch over because some students are back yet. Instructors need to let students know at the end of the 15 minutes we're starting class again, and you need to be back. The syllabus is about deadlines. The instructor needs to set deadlines for him or myself. I think a quarter, a week is reasonable to get back assignments. Students in a 10-week quarter, they need to know how they're doing, and they need assignment back within a week, and it needs to be in the syllabus, and that's something instructors need to stick to, and it really will help students feel a little more control and not so nervous about waiting for these grades. Students also need to set deadlines for assignments and be consistent about that. Don't keep pushing back deadlines, and students never really know when a deadline is set in stone. And if things are in the syllabus, then a student comes to us complaining, an instructor didn't let me turn in an assignment late. We can look at the syllabus and say, well, according to the syllabus, the instructor said that no assignments, no late assignments will be accepted. So these type of things just make the class run smoothly and eliminate a lot of problems. Communication. Instructors need to let students know how is the best way to communicate with them. Number, maybe, I know we don't encourage that. We've had some issues with instructors giving out their phone number, and it's not something to encourage. For me personally, I tell students the best way to get a hold of me is through email. I may not be in my office because I'm not always there, but if you send me an email, I'll get back to you. Students within 24 hours. I think that's probably one of the biggest complaints that I read on teacher evaluations. I send the instructor emails, and the instructor never responds to me. So that's something they need to establish. Office phone number, all those things need to be part of the syllabus so the students know how to contact the instructor. Expectations for students. I'm thinking back to Harry Wong's book for young students. I sometimes need to hear what they need to be prepared with. You need a pencil and paper every day. How many times does a college student show up without a notebook or a book? Us want students to bring the textbook, or maybe there's a supplemental book they don't need to bring each time, but they need to know what they need to bring to class. So in addition, we tell them, bring your APA book every day. We may not use it every day, but we're going to use it a lot of days. So things that students need to hear on the first day. Course calendar are the syllabus. I do a separate course calendar, and I know a lot of instructors do that, but it's going to at least be in the syllabus, and that's where the student needs to be directed to every week. When a student comes in and says, I didn't know there was a quiz today. Well, look at the calendar. What did your course calendar say? Because if you looked at there, you would have seen, the quiz today, and to be consistent. And then another procedure that they do in K through 12 that college instructors don't do. I noticed this when we're like a former K through 12 teacher, they'll put the daily agenda on board and attach it to the SLOs, which really should correspond with the course calendar. But say something like, today we will what? What agenda? What are the students going to be completing today? They know that, and instructors may feel like that a college student needs to know, but they really do. It's going to make them comfortable. They're sort of checking it off mentally as you go through it. When you connect it to the SLOs, what it tells them is that, I'm taking this course seriously. Seriously enough, I'm going to write it on the board. I'm going to let you know what the SLO is today. We're going to apply voice to our writing. That's SLO 3, right? And let them know that you're seeing that and that you value what's going on in the classroom. And Jack, anything to add here?
Academic advisor, one issue that I run across is students will come in to see me about something and maybe a complaint about an instructor, or they have something that they're unclear about. And what I do with students is I have them either pull out their syllabus or have them right in my office into their Blackboard course. And we're looking for the syllabus and information from that a teacher puts up there. If everything's there, here's the course calendar, here's what's due, here's my policy for if you turn in something late. All of those things that you talked about, it gives me a good foundation to have a good quality discussion with a student to say, here's the information that was already presented to you, so your complaint doesn't sound right, have you talked to the instructor? But if I log do a Blackboard course with a student and find that the instructor has nothing posted on Blackboard, no extra information that's supposed to build in on that required syllabus template. I'm really worried because then I can't have a quality conversation with the student. I can't advise them without checking with the instructor or bringing them back to the instructor and saying there's nothing I can do. So a really good advising appointment happens when I can help that student kind of decode what the instructor has already set forth. And 9 out of 10, if the instructor has all that stuff in the syllabus, the student really takes responsibility for that and says, yep, you know what, this information was here, I should have known that, now I know where to find it, or now I see why there's an issue. But if there's nothing there, that's a red flag. That's a big problem that I see, and it makes me almost want to side more with the student because I don't know what's expected either.
Right. I hear that from our dean all the time. She said, if it's in your syllabus and a student comes to me, she said, I can support you. But if it's not in your syllabus, it makes it a lot harder to support you because I don't know what the student was told. So, yeah, that's something that should be communicated to our instructors.
Respecting students is something that that have multiple viewpoints. The first 4 things, common ways to demonstrate respect, and they're not always followed. But the best advice that I can give an instructor is to just show how passionate you are about your subject and just be nice. That goes a long way. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't be firm and you can't set expectations, but most complaints that students have about an instructor isn't very respectful have to do with the negative or condescending or rude attitudes that an instructor might display. Sometimes it's not on purpose. There are instructors who don't realize that this is how they're coming off. So when I talk to an instructor that comes to me for advice on an issue in a classroom, usually I ask them, tell me how you said that in class, or give me about, how this conversation might have happened. Years I've had from students, had a lot of things that students have said to me. So those next ones, don't embarrass me in front of the class. If you've got a problem with a student, tell me, unless it's like interrupting what's going on in the class, tell them to talk to him separately, or redirect the rest of the class to work on something and then go talk to that student individually. But embarrassing a student in front of the class, like, just answered that question, why weren't you paying attention, that's not productive, and it's just going to cause tension in the classroom. Questions, a lot of students have told me, asked a question and they just ignored me, or I sent an email 3 times and I didn't get a response. Slow down. If you're willing to get the content into the next 10 minutes, it's not pause this process. Let them think about what they're doing. Do the work is another part. Well, we had all this stuff to do and we didn't even get a chance to try it. I'm thinking more of like maybe where they're taught tons of concepts at once and they don't get a chance to pause in between and try it to make sure they know how to do it. Or INF class, if they don't get a chance to actually do something on the computer to make sure they do it right before they move on to something else. And it goes back to something that Terry said earlier. If I turn in my assignments on time, great time. If there's an essay to be turned in on week 2, great, reasonable amount of time. Don't go to week 7 where they have to turn in 3 more essays and no idea how they did on the first one.
Well, a recent story had an instructor, and I had so many complaints about an instructor, and the complaints were the instructor's rude, she's disrespectful to us, and I talked to her about it, and she was totally miffed by this. She said, I've never received complaints like this anywhere I've worked before, and so we're trying to figure out, what's going on here. And as reading her evaluations and reading the comments that students were making, they would say they might question her, they might push her a little bit and say, why do we have to write so much in this class? And she'd respond, what are you, a bunch of kindergartners? This is college. She would make those comments to them. And what would happen is she would take their bait, they push her, and she would respond in a condescending way, which might have seemed appropriate to her because I'm sure they probably started it. But the problem is, she was getting such disrespect. Everyone the class and to that student. And there's a better way to handle it. So she would come in and work with me, and we practiced some role play, and it was good for her. She didn't want to do it, but, I had to try to be the student and have her try to respond in a way that deflected it. For her to, we're writing a lot because it's important in criminal justice class. You're responsible to write accurate reports. They have to go into court. They have to pass the test. You can't make mistakes. I have to do well in your profession. She could have handled it better, and she didn't. And it's hard to figure it out, but she was just letting them, acting like the student. She was mirroring them instead of setting a different example that the students can follow. Because I found when students throw that at me, if I change it and respond respectfully and maybe answer their question, it just stops them right there. But this is a topic that definitely you could role play with your instructors.
Yeah, the way that a instructor acts to student bickering is to, in the FGEP, there's a section there that talks about professional behavior. And, you like that at your job, so that towards students. Before we go into this next part, another thing that I just wanted to mention is a really good instructor can read student language really well, and if the body language of several students seems to indicate that there's an issue that maybe they understand something or somebody in the class is distracting them, that an instructor can pick up on those and articulate those into dealing with the problems now rather than letting them escalate into something later.
Because the other day, a student, I was rushing a bit, like you were saying, and just made this sign to her friend like her head was going to explode. And I picked up on that. I was like, okay, she didn't mean for me to see it, but that means slow down. So you really pay attention. We can notice those things. Now, helping instructors manage the workload. What it look like when you run into an instructor in the hallway and they're overwhelmed with their job. Right? They're dropping things, they look frenzied, their hair is crazy. I've seen this before. They're completely overwhelmed. And read these comments on the evaluations when instructors aren't handling the workload well. Now, what I'd say is you may be giving that instructor too many classes. 3 classes is a lot. A person works full-time and has 3 Comp 1 classes, maybe that is just too much work for that instructor. There are things that we can really help them do that will lessen the workload tremendously. And I've had to learn to do this over the last couple of years and help my instructors because we know we're having to do more with less and less time. So to talk to your instructors about is leveraging Blackboard. Teach writing, we've used inline grading for a while, even before we used it in Blackboard. It's an enormous amount of time. When I introduced my instructors to it a few years ago, I had a lot of instructors that were retired from K-12, and they had their paper. And they said, we want our paper. We have to hold these essays in our hands. But we went in there and started grading, in the inline grading features. They saw how much time it saved. And if your instructors haven't learned how to do this yet, there's tutorials on our Effective Teaching and Learning. Blackboard has tutorials. They can go to YouTube and find a tutorial about how to use the inline grading. And IESs can help with that too. It's going to save a tremendous amount of time, even for homework assignments that may only be 2 pages long. It's still, the inline grading is a time saver. Then clickable rubrics. Some of our courses come with clickable rubrics right now, but not all of them do, meaning the instructional designers put those in. But if we're going to design them, they're really not that hard, but you may need a tutorial on that, and again, you can find this information online. But it's about something like a Blackboard discussion board, every week for all your classes. If you use a clickable rubric, I use one that just has, it's 10 points, 5 points for content, 5 points for writing. And students know I won't give them 5 points for writing if they have mechanical errors or they're not capitalizing their I. They catch on to that. But it's so fast and it's so quick. And it is an assessment. And I'm reading them, but it's not taking me that long. And that's one area that they really need some help in because the discussion board is new to us. this year, our instructors are needing to in every class, and they're finding that it's taking them a little more time than they want. And be a real-time saver. At the end of class, I do is I put an announcement, let them know, okay, this is what we did, this is what you need to be prepared with for the next class. I try to put all that important information. And the student sends me an email and says, hey, I wasn't in class, what did we do? You just refer that student to Blackboard announcements. And the question that they can certainly ask the instructor, but the announcements, doing those consistently is going to be a time saver too. And not having the My Files feature on Blackboard, which is probably new to most instructors, but it's a way to house their documents and particularly their clickable rubrics, so not to export them outside of the Blackboard. That would be a real time saver, and you're actually going to be getting that. There has been some, there's a website developed and tutorials that you'll have access to, and that's going to be really helpful for instructors. It's going to save them a lot of time from quarter to quarter. Time savers. Holistic assessments for in-class assignments. If you think about, giving students, let's say, a writing assignment in any class, and home, and on top of all the other work, now you have all these writing assignments that you grade. Well, why are you assessing that assignment? Because you know what they learned. Did they understand what I taught them, or do I need to go back and reteach something? So what you can do is, through the project or the assignment, writing, whatever it was, and then I kind of take notes as you're going through each student's work. You'll have to make comments on every single piece of writing. And the next class, you bring that to class and say, okay, I reviewed your writing, and I want to talk about some of the things that I saw. This is what you're doing great. Here's some things we still need to work on. That I found to be a huge time saver. Class assessments, too. Instructors can do in-class assessments that they don't have to take home with them. Like, for example, I like to use role plays a lot. If I'm teaching students something and I want to know, can they apply that concept, give them a role play situation. Raise of hands, make an exit ticket before they leave. There's things that instructors can do to assess students, which is so important, but it won't create a lot of work outside of the classroom. And staggering the grading. The instructor has 3 Comp 1 classes, and all the essays are due week 4. That's a lot of grading, 75 essays week 4. That instructor have a really hard time returning those in a week. And this issue a lot. Sometimes instructors can't get it done. And if they can find a way to stagger, maybe one class and assignments due the end of week 3 and one class is due week 4, you might help them manage the workload. And maybe even thinking about not teaching the same class. They really can't get away from that time schedule. Maybe different classes that have assignments due at different weeks. Just to get their grading done in a timely fashion. And communication. As I said, this is the biggest complaint that I get about faculty. They don't return emails. Often, emails because they aren't good at managing those emails. I know if an instructor is teaching a couple classes, they're coming in, right, constantly getting emails. And I experience that not just instructors, but people are very good at managing their Google Mail. They can labels or folders, they call them labels in Google. They can set up for each of the classes. So if they have 1 classes, they've got the 3 classes. When a student shows up in their inbox with a question, answer as soon as you can. Because student may have, maybe Wednesday, that may be their only day to work. They need you to get right back to them. And usually it's pretty simple. Talk to that student and file it in the class folder. And if they need to go back to that email, access it very quickly. But I often a lesson in that. So if you're finding that your instructors are, you're reading that comment on evaluations, not getting back to me, talk about that and see why that is, and if it's a matter of managing that email. In terms of announcements, again, going back to Blackboard announcements, let's know that every week, at the end of the week, or maybe at the end of each class, you post in the announcements what they need for the next week, or maybe what you did. And keep in mind that this can be something a student who missed class can go to and look at. And students who are in class, frankly, the reason I do it right after class is I'm later, sometimes I forget, what did we do on Wednesday's class? So really be a time saver too. And anything to add here?
We need a discussion with that struggling faculty member. I think it's really effective if this question to the instructor. If you say, would you a student in your own class? Does that really cause that instructor to do some self-reflection? If they're instructors who haven't been trained in the education side of it, maybe they're a practicing nurse and they're great at nursing, but they're not so great at managing classrooms. So what is it about what's going in their class that maybe they as a student might find irritating or mismanaged, or that could have some improvement? So instructor, would you want to be a student in your own class? Why or why not? We'll and then you a very constructive conversation will follow. This one is on building a learning community. I said earlier that one of the things I do on week 1, day 1 is I really make sure that students are comfortable in the classroom, because that will really set the tone. So, like the that Terry gave about look to your left, look to your right, one of you won't be here at the end of the quarter. You say 50% of you are going to withdraw or fail this class. That's not a good thing. My personal educational opinion is you have to start from day 1 setting a positive tone. That safety and security of the classroom is what will determine whether or not students want to be there and want to learn. Because once you destroy that safety and security of the classroom, you put up a barrier between you and the students, and between the student and their ability to comfortably learn. A lot of psychology behind that. It's a proven. So I'm really big on making sure that students feel comfortable. And not only do I want them to feel comfortable with me, but I want to feel comfortable with each other. That's a career necessary skill. So if back on your student days, you probably remember some classes that you loved being in. You can think about what made you want to be in that class, or work with those classmates, or do group work. It probably reflects back to the way the instructor set up that learning community. You guys have access to this Google Slider so that you can look at these two on there. But there's an article from Faculty Focus called "Love the One You're With: Creating a Classroom Community," and some quick tips about kind of getting out of your comfort zone, being really creative with almost forcing students to face that these are people you're going to be with for the next 10 weeks, so let's get to know each other and feel comfortable communicating. From the forfaculty.org, there are some really good tips and icebreakers and group activities that can be done to help build that learning community. In addition, the discussion board is a really good way, if you monitor it correctly, it's a really good way to create a learning community where it feels like they're on a level field, where they all have the ability to think about something and respond without whether or not, ooh, she's going to call me, or ooh, I don't want to answer because they might think I'm dumb. It's another way to really create a learning community that's face-to-face. And something that I discovered over the years is allow students to talk with each other as much as or more than they talk to you or than you talk to them is really super important. I really believe that students learn by teaching each other. Even as simple as solving a math problem. If you have a student tell somebody else, here's how to solve this, it's amazing what you'll hear in the classroom when you have students teach each other, because they will correct each other and they will support each other, and they'll say, wait, remember that? Remember when she said this? No, when we did that, that was right or that was wrong. And really the whole thing is that concept about letting them work in groups, understand that as a career college, that career readiness real life scenario is really important for them to experience. We don't want somebody sitting in the back corner of the room saying a single word and thinking they're going to graduate with a bachelor's of management and never talk to anybody. That's just not going to happen. What I found that helped me manage my classroom better was when I allowed students to do some of that 5, 10, 20-minute group work, to work on stuff or to talk to each other about things. It gives me a mental break and even a physical break to be able to go and get ready for the next thing. Maybe my attendance while they're all doing that. Maybe I'm going to, pull the next set of papers that I want them to work on. So it's a real good way to balance that whole classroom feeling where it's not just I'm the teacher in charge of everything. It really shifts that focus to that learner-centered instruction.
About what you said about getting out of your comfort zone. So crucial to learner-centered instruction, and I think it's something that instructors really struggle with. I was with a student, and he would not be placed in a certain instructor's class. And so I asked why, and he said, you know what, she's a girl, but if you can't ever lighten up, let her guard down, have some fun, he said, I can't take it. And what was interesting is, this is one of my instructors, I've been observing her, and that's exactly what I've been working on her with. She controls, she controls everything. Her classes, dead silent. She's just terrified that they're in chaos if she does something. And what? It can get messy and chaotic. And you just got to try to be comfortable with some of that messiness. If you want students to learn from each other, it's always going to look pretty and nice and neat, and that's just something that we have to get used to. About small groups. So you do observation in the classroom, and have you ever seen this? The instructor is ready to put students in group work and get introduction to the assignment that definitely isn't clear, doesn't really make sense to you. Students get in groups. See, some students aren't participating. You hear grouping off topic. Some students aren't engaged in the work, or sometimes a student slips out of the classroom, and okay, this instructor needs some help with group work. And let's be honest, we don't always do this group work very well. But a couple things to point out to the instructor, and the first thing is those providing clear instructions. So I'm confused by the instructions, and so I know the students are. And the instructions on the overhead, on the board, but students need to see the process, and they need to have time to think about it before they're in group. So maybe it's to give those instructions before they break up and before we get that chaos. What's expected, let them ask questions before you get started. And then the group they need to produce something. Produce a product, a presentation, writing. There should be something that they're producing that can actually be assessed. Because if we can't assess what they did, what's the point in this activity if we assess it and determine whether they can apply these concepts or not? And we all, from working in groups ourselves, not everybody wants to participate. So what are some things you can do to get students involved? Well, certainly, each student is responsible for a certain thing. What I do often is spokesperson myself. For some reason, students and faculty members don't like to be the spokesperson. And if a person who's the spokesperson seems to understand the material the best because they have to. But if at a time who's going to be the spokesperson, then they don't have to learn it. And if they're on somebody, maybe they don't do well because they weren't really participating and they feel uncomfortable. That's what they can feel uncomfortable, and ask their group members, can you come out here and maybe can or can't, and throw it out to the class. Okay, class, well, how can you help them solve this problem? And when students are put on the spot like that, you can see it in their faces. They're very uncomfortable. And the next time we do group work, they tend to participate a lot better. But they have to be held accountable. And if you're not going to hold them accountable, this is when you're going to see students slip out, students on their cell phones. They need to observe the groups more closely than they usually do. I discover necessarily sit down with a group and like, actually evaluating that. Like, I teach group, so yesterday I've got the rubric, and I'm here, and I'm watching how you're acting, and I am evaluating you, but it's group dynamics class. Most instructors probably wouldn't do that, but they need to observe, and if they suspect a group is off task, they can come over and say, okay, you were developing a position argument, so can you just, in your own words, tell me what your position is right now? How far have you got? Tell me where you're at. It lets them watching that it's important, that they do need to stay on task. And then group, if it's group work in class and the work is valuable, there needs to be some grade assigned to it. The grade is just basically, did they meet the criteria? You ask them to do these 5 things, did they do it? It could be a checklist, or you could actually assess the quality of it. You know, that's possible too. But if you do those things, the group work is going to be valuable. Yes?
Even if you don't assign an official grade that goes in Grade Center, you could say, if I were to grade this would be what grade your group would get. So when you get to this formal presentation, this will be an idea about how far your group is, what you work on, what you're good at, and what, you know, to happen. In the groups, like if you would hand them something and say, you know, your group has gotten this grade, yeah. Other like management things, you can have a system going where, like, if you have Group A, Group B, Group C, and Group D, then maybe each one of those groups, when their group feels like they've completed the assigned task, but the other groups haven't, they stick it out and go stick it next to their group label, so that way you don't have to say, is everybody done? Is everybody done? You have an indication of knowing that the bubble seems to be increasing is because everybody is done. Because there will be those times where groups just want to keep talking just so that they don't have to go on to the next thing. I think that the best group work assessment, if you're going to give an actual grade, there needs to be input from all of the members in the group. It's fair and equal, and sometimes you'll find things that you didn't observe yourself, but that the other members will be able to say, this is what happened.
And when students read that feedback from their classmates, they're surprised they got a low grade, and it's really good for them to get that feedback.
Another thing, I think that if the instructor can kind of ahead of time set the tone for how group work is going to happen, I think there's, to me, 2 different kinds of group work. I'm thinking specifically about when we steer students into a career, what the job is really going to be like. There's a difference between break room group work and conference room group work. If you're in a break room, it might be a little more informal, might just be, you know, kind of brainstorming, might be kind of feeling out what you might want to do. But if you're in a conference room, there's an agenda, there's a set schedule, there are things that need to be done. So there's a difference between that informal and that formal kind of group work, and students need to know that ahead of time. If this is just a simple brainstorming session, okay, this is break room group work. But if you've got something need to get done, they need to take it seriously and go to conference room group work mode.
That come up in the classroom. That can be small things if instructors deal with them right away, but often they don't. You know, one of the comments I hear from instructors is they don't be mean, or they don't want to seem like they're overly strict, but they handle these, you know, these small issues to manage them well. So the first thing is talking in class. Out of when the instructor is talking, students are talking, and this happens in a lot of classes, and we don't want to overreact to it, but think of the simple things the instructor can do if you're noticing this in their class. And one thing an instructor can do is, students talking, just walk over to where those students are. What happens when the instructor walks to the middle, all eyes follow, students turn around and watch that instructor. So there were 2 students who were talking, and sometimes to make them stop. Or just, you know, sometimes I just might tap on the desk, you know, to say, hey, and they will stop. Or simple, John, Susan, I need you to stop talking now, please. And students say, okay, you know, sure. Now, if they continue that, this can role play with an instructor too. You know, there are times when I've had to just stop class and just say, excuse me for just a minute, I want to talk to David and Susan. And then say, David, I've asked you several times to stop talking. It's very distracting to me and to classmates. Can you do they will, if I've kind of stopped to do that, they'll stop. Now, it's an issue ever where a student really wouldn't stop. And I had to put the student on a behavior contract for talking in class, but it was really getting out of control. And it actually turned around, and he was able to overcome that. But most times, it's a very simple thing to stop. But instructors have to do it right away, because if they don't, it tells the rest of the students that they don't care. It tells the students they're talking, that, keep on talking. And the complaint I hear often from students is that the instructor allows other students to talk in class, and then they can't hear or take notes. Then are leaving early. Make sure your instructors know never to wait to start class for late students. I heard this recently of my instructors, a complaint that the instructor was waiting 15 minutes to start class until it arrived. No, never. If it's snowing, the roads are bad, start class. You can stall. You can do something to stall. But they need to know class starts at 6 o'clock. Because what happens if you start 15 minutes late every day? Well, go up at 6 o'clock if the class is really going to start at 6:15. So that you start early. There's you can put in place. Maybe if you're finding that your students want to leave early, maybe a quiz at the end of the hour, maybe an assessment. Maybe if you have a day where a lot of students left, do a quiz assignment. When they see a 0 in the grade book, it turns them around a lot. And of course, day one, let them know the expectations. In class, I that she had a student who was making inappropriate sounds during class. On for a little while, and at one point he said to her, I think you're really serious about me stopping. And I realized what she was doing is she was making this a discussion, an argument. He would say something inappropriate, and she'd say, now, John, that's not appropriate. You shouldn't be saying something like that. Well, when a student uses inappropriate language, they know they're inappropriate. They don't need you to get into a discussion or a debate about why it's inappropriate. If John says something inappropriate, John, inappropriate. Please don't say that again. Again, you can tell John, I'll ask you to leave class if you say that again. You say it directly and then redirect. Then immediately turn away from that student, face the class, and continue teaching. And it lets that student know this isn't a conversation. You know it's inappropriate and it's not acceptable. And that you can deal with right away and it stops, or you can just let it go on and on and on, and then you get students complaining about it later. Well, they have to be held accountable, just like group work, that student that wants to slip out. The student be held accountable. They shouldn't be doing something every class. They should be producing some type of product that you can assess, assign a grade to it. Maybe that you as an instructor or your instructors are giving space for all students to participate. You may hear 4 vocal students, and that's all you hear. Well, it's your responsibility as an instructor. If we're only hearing 3 voices, what can you do to allow those voices that are to be heard? Maybe ask a question, have everybody write it down first. Nobody speaks out loud. Maybe you need to call on students. If they aren't participating, it's not always because they don't want to. And just call on them, just so we hear their voice, lets them know they're important, that you see them, that you care about them. I can't tell you how many grandparents have died this semester, right? Students have excuses all the time why they don't turn in assignments, but we have to be consistent with that. We have to have consistent expectations. If it's in the syllabus, it says no late homework, then don't allow the late homework. Now, if you feel like the student really, has a good excuse and maybe can provide documentation, that's fine, but let them know that. Some students need to believe them. If you have a really good student, maybe just trust them. That's okay too. And then in the classroom, this is going to be bringing a device of sorts to the classroom. are your policies on this? This is something that change for your instructors, and you have the BYOD becomes start. They're going to think about this conversation. Is it okay for a student to have a phone out? Some instructors say they don't want to see the phone, and that's okay. That's your rule, but students need to know that. And then if it's texting in class and you said no, you have to call them on it. You have to be consistent with that and be willing to revisit the conversation. Maybe at the beginning of the quarter, but it's obvious that you need to revisit it because you have several students that are texting. It's something that we're going to have to work out, and I changed my policy through the years, and I know teachers have, and this fall they're really going to need to think about it and really have something written about using mobile devices in the classroom.
These topics, it really comes down to mutual respect. One of the strategies I've used is I'll be really over dramatic about my cell phone. I'll pull it out and talk about how my teenagers showed me how to use a smartphone and I can do Facebook, or check the internet, or read the news, and text my daughter who's off at Michigan State, and this is so cool, and pretend like I'm answering the phone. I'll have this really ridiculous conversation about meeting me at 6 o'clock for pizza, and I'll bring the pop or something. And I start walking out of the classroom, and sometimes I've even actually left the classroom. And then I say, seriously, I would do that to you, so please don't do that to me or to the other classmates. That typically stops issues if you really show, I'm not going to do this, so I don't expect you to do this either. Just agreeing to have that mutual respect for each other as students and as professionals, which is what their goal is, to be a professional. With difficult students is something that every instructor struggles with at some point. I've had two specific instances that I can recall. And the first time it happened, it really kind of threw me off guard because I don't normally have issues with difficult students. What the class wants to see is that you're going to hold your ground, you're there, but you're also going to make sure that the rest of the students in the class are able to learning without having that huge distraction. There's where those common situations are listed. A student can be very argumentative with you. Say, I think let's agree to disagree right now, and let's pick this up at the end of class because I do want to make sure that I address your concerns. I think that you have valid concerns, and let's go on with the rest of the class, and you and I can discuss this later. When other students, sometimes you'll find that students in the class will stand up for that and kind of ahead of time, but if you see it consistently, the instructor really needs to address that. I had an experience at one point where I had a group of students, 4 or 5 students that would sit in the same place. It was a night class. They were friends, so they talked a lot. And I always say, if I'm talking, I want to be able to talk. I'm going to give you time to talk when I'm done talking, so let's take turns. And week 7, and this group of students kept talking to the point where other students were looking at them, glaring at them. So I just stopped. I looked at them and I said, see, it's 7. Come on. And just a simple statement, teaching, that caused the rest of the quarter to go just fine. I think students don't know that they're being rude. They are used to multitasking. They are used to doing more than one thing at a time. And some students really don't take the seriousness of class the same way that some of our older students would. The thing is the same thing with the argumentative thing. If it's a group where the whole class is complaining, that will take time where you might have to say, I really want to think about your complaints and I want to get back to you in a little bit. Or maybe in the next class period, or maybe review this with my dean. But some situations are things where the instructor needs to make sure that they're standing their ground, they're acknowledging that the student has a problem or an issue that they want solved. It needs to be solved outside of the learning time. Anything else on that one? that this helped you kind of think about what classroom management should look like as you're observing the instructors. And those bullet points listed there, we kind of address the most common things that we've noticed or that we've experienced or that we've heard about. And really what we hope is that you will feel a little more comfortable instructors who have some difficulty with classroom management or looking for things that could be an issue, and to respond to the student evaluations or the student complaints by really a foundation of some skills and some information you can give the instructors.
This is our presentation, and we want everyone for attending. We hope you found it helpful.
3 minutes. Is there anybody who has like a burning question or comment that you really want to say? On this WebEx, you have registered for it, so we will send you a copy of this Google slide so that you can react to it and click on those links and have some more information as a tool for your toolbox.